Hey guys, sorry I'm getting to this video late tonight, and I'm sorry that I didn't get you guys a video yesterday, but I was just super busy this weekend working on the new house, cutting grass, weed eating, going back and forth. We had to pick up my stepson a new TV because the other TV got broken once it got moved over here, and just moving. So we took yesterday to watch Superman 3 and Superman 4, which Noah had never seen before. So that was kind of interesting in and amongst itself. But I've got a book here that I wanted to talk about, and it's 2 issues actually, of The Incredible Hulk by Paul Jenkins, John Romita Jr., and Tom Palmer. Alright guys, so we have issue 24 and issue 25 of The Incredible Hulk. Like I said, written by Paul Jenkins with art by John Romita Jr. and Dick Giordano on issue 24 for inks, and Tom Palmer on issue 25 for inks. So what I really hated was that about the time that Paul Jenkins took over the title, Ron Garney, who has a style somewhat similar to Romita Jr. at this point, and his inker Sal Buscema, who I will always love, left the title. Now you get Paul Jenkins as a new writer. You get a new penciler in John Romita Jr., who's also doing a Spider-Man book, I believe, at the same time. And you get both legends Dick Giordano and Tom Palmer inking over Romita Jr.'s pencils. So what I love about this run, and these 2 issues in particular, Jenkins didn't shy away from the psychological aspects of the title. Not horror aspects, mind you, but psychological aspects, exploring why Bruce acts the way that he does, why the Hulk needs to exist in the first place. Paul Jenkins, in my mind, is one of the most underrated writers of the late 90s and early 2000s Marvel. People just sleep on his stuff for the majority of the part. But you get the Abomination, who is covered himself head to toe, but he's leading a writing class, a creative writing class. And I think that's amazing that you take the intelligence of Emil Blonsky and you give him something to do with it, rather than him being just a bad guy in the Hulk's life. Instead, Blonsky is trying, it appears, to turn over a new leaf. But oddly enough, you don't see that the creative writing class questions why they have a 7-foot-tall writer who is clad head to toe. You know, me, I would have been like, what is this guy's story? What is going on here? But instead, you get a character piece about Emil Blonsky and why it's so important to him to fight the Hulk. Blonsky, as the Abomination, has always been kind of Hulk 1.5. Because he's bigger, his hide or his armor, quote-unquote, is tougher. And the Hulk has always had one heck of a time fighting him and beating him. And you get to see that part of Banner's anger towards the Abomination is he's the one that gave Betty Ross her fatal dose of gamma radiation, which in issue, I believe, 466 of the previous run by Peter David and Adam Kubert, you get to see Betty die and be put into a stasis chamber until Thunderbolt Ross can figure out a way to bring her back. So she doesn't turn into a Hulk, she doesn't die, she's just in cryostasis. But Bruce Banner still takes it very personally that Blonsky had anything to do with Betty's being harmed. So Thunderbolt Ross shows up, and he says, hey, I think that there's something that you need to see. So it's setting up this massive... Oh, by the way, they did a throwback price of $199 on issue 24. So how cool is that you got that whole story? And that's another item I want to tackle later on in another video. You get a whole story in this one issue. Comics don't really do that anymore. They don't really tell one story per issue that is an overarching story arc, but instead they just give you 2/3 of a story and then continue it on the next month. Where's my whole story? I'm paying $5 here where I paid $1.99 for this, and I'm much more entertained by that than I am, maybe whatever comes this week. I'll probably be more entertained by this than I am what's coming this week in the pile. All right? This is a modern-day classic, in my opinion. You can't touch it. Here is the knockdown, drag-out World War III fight between the Abomination and the Incredible Hulk. And so you get this scene where Bruce is just thinking it over and overthinking it and thinking through it again. And, what am I going to do about this? Meanwhile, you have the different Hulks inside of his mind saying, hey, you need to calm down. You need to think rationally. You need to plan out your method of offense as well as defense. And he said, the Professor Hulk says, you forgave Blonsky for what he did. And Banner says, no, you forgave him because, God forbid, you're my forgiving side. You're my thoughtful side. So, in the end, the Hulk is unleashed. He goes after Blonsky, who realizes that the Hulk is catching up to him to try to find him. And one of the guys that was inside of the writer's class is actually the one that tips Thunderbolt Ross off and says, looks like he's moving again. Didn't say where he's going, but it looks like he's on to us. So the Abomination, unlike the Hulk, has to go into the deep sea to even get any peace and quiet because he's even more frightening looking than Hulk is. But here comes the Hulk, and they just have a smash fest, absolutely destructive battle that you see the power in each one of the strokes from both the pencil and the inks. And I'll say this, Tom Palmer can make a stick man look better. Rest in peace, Tom. He could make any kind of page look better. So they brought on the heavy hitters of Dick Giordano last issue, who had inked Romita before on his Thor run. And then this issue you get Tom Palmer. And there's always collateral damage when you're talking about a psychological story, but here there's physical collateral damage. They're destroying each other. The Abomination is choking the Hulk out underneath the water, and so the Hulk has to slam him repeatedly into this dam to create some separation. So Blonsky thinks he's killed him. I hope that your ears are burning and, as your lungs collapse. And the Hulk just keeps coming. And finally we get this awesome double-page spread of the Hulk just slamming his fist into Blonsky's face as hard as he can because Blonsky tormented him one too many times, saying, all that muscle and you couldn't even protect the woman that you love. And that finally gives the Hulk a chance to get over on Emo Blonsky. And you see the anger and the rage inside of the Hulk. You see anger that will move mountains, literally move mountains. And Blonsky says, hey, go ahead, dipstick. Go ahead and kill me. Go ahead and end my suffering here on Earth. And he says, put us both out of our misery. And in the end, you get to see that Thunderbolt Ross had been manipulating Bruce Banner, kind of to do his dirty work. But at the same time, you get two of the most action-packed issues. Let's see, when was this from? This is March 2001. Okay, so this is right after he's left Thor, but as far as I remember, he's still penciling Amazing Spider-Man at that point. So you're still getting a John Romita Jr. who's doing 2 books a month. But in this book, you get 2 full stories. You get all the action that you could ever want from a Michael Bay film. You get a classic version of the Hulk. You get an updated and more nuanced version of the Abomination. So what more could you ask for? I mean, really, folks, what more would you want? That's the question I have after talking about this particular issue, or actually this 2-issue story arc. Paul Jenkins, if you're sleeping on him, go read the original Century miniseries. It's 5 issues plus 3 or 4 one-shot extras. Read his Incredible Hulk run, where he writes it from, I think, issue 18 maybe, through issue 33, before it's taken over by Bruce Jones. There's just, I don't know. I mean, he did Hellblazer back in the day. He's done so many great books that people just sleep on. Romita Jr., I don't really think I have to sell you on him. Either you like him or you don't. And then, like I said, the inkers and the colorists, it all just comes together in a perfect package. So if you guys didn't read this when it first came out, way back in 2001, do yourself a favor, search your dollar bins, see what you come up with. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll have another couple of videos coming up in the next few days. Let's continue this comic book journey that we're on. If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, hit me up, hit a like at the bottom of this, and give me a subscribe so that I can continue to bring you guys interesting content just like this.